wonder what will then design the design after yoga session.
Excellent. Okay, I think we're live. I hope we're live. And I'm even unmuted this time, so success on all counts. Welcome everyone to another Wardley Mapping Conversations. This is the game show where the maps don't matter, but the points do. Am I getting? No, I'm messing up that quote. Anyway, so welcome everyone. If you're a first-time viewer, welcome. It's so nice to have you here. I'm really excited to hear what piqued your interest and what raised the eyebrows and made you show up. So please say hello in chat. I'll say hello as well. If you're a return viewer, thank you for coming back. I'm glad we didn't scare you off with our last couple streams, so thank you. Today, David and I are super excited to be joined by Vesna. Vesna has a whole like deep knowledge of all sorts of things around like enterprise portfolio management and things like that. But today, we're going to talk about yoga. So, with that, I thought maybe Vesna, tell us a little bit about your experiences that about yoga that made you interested in maybe making a map of it today. Like, what do you do yoga? Do you teach yoga? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, I kind of remember when we met that I mentioned yoga and probably got really excited and you remember that. So as we were chatting what might be a good topic for me, this came up. And I have very eclectic interests. I'm very curious about tons of stuff, but somehow yoga is this thing that connects things for me. And I'm studying yoga, and I think it's never going to end. It's one of those things that just seems like I'm always at the beginning, and probably even more so. The more I do it, I feel like I'm just like even more kind of just grounded and humble about how big topic it is. So that's why I'm kind of comfortable to share this because I know nothing about it. I know something. So I'm good to explore and see what happens today. And so just, I guess, as a kind of timeline, I started practicing it in my 20s and went mostly to yoga classes for the asanas. And then a few years ago, I finally dared to join a yoga study group to become a teacher. I haven't really graduated. I'm still very, like have all the books and material and really ramping up my courage to go to whatever that next step might be and how to share it.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's just, it's a huge topic. So let's let's see what happens today.
I love it. Yeah, and what's great about that too is that you mentioned not being the expert or not knowing everything about it is kind of, I think, one of the best reasons to make a map, because people who do tend to know things tend to know less than they think they know about a particular topic, especially experts. So,
Oh, far from it. Not an expert.
well, so
And
what's
probably many people in the audience might be even contributing more than I can. But anyway, I'm really curious and I love it. So that's my perspective on this.
well, there's something great about being willing to I mean, come at it with a fresh perspective and dive in and learn stuff. There's something lovely about expert naivety. It's like you know things about one area, but you are applying it to a different area. Just the way that you think about things, and so you explore it differently. You see the practices, and the fresh perspective that you bring also enables you to understand and know it differently. And that means that as you get better and better and better, like your practice, your version of it will be different than everyone else's, and that can be extremely valuable. So I put a link in our call here to a Miro board, and I'm gonna try to get that set up here. We've got a Miro board with kind of like a basic setup here, and let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen on the stream. Let's see here, and boom. I hope that's it. Yeah. Okay. Um, so we've got kind of like a workspace setup, and we've got like Wardley mapping workspace in the top, and then some reference down on the bottom. And some of this will look familiar to the viewers and to you as well, because I think where we met was actually at the You Will Make Maps event. So that was awesome that you came to that. And this is kind of like how we got started on this lovely topic. But let's decide what to map first. I think so. I'm off to the left of the map template area. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of drawing, and maybe we can figure out what we'd like to explore together by kind of playing in this space off to the side. So first, I know, like, broadly speaking, we have this topic of yoga. Um, but I'm curious, is it yoga that's interesting, or is it the instruction of yoga that's interesting? What is really capturing your interest with yoga today in particular?
There's so many things that come to mind. One thing I've heard, and I think it's true for yoga, it's kind of a way of life.
Hmm.
So it can really be um, integrated with the, I would say, different levels of like users, someone who is more experienced or someone who knows nothing about yoga. Maybe today we can map for like beginners, like someone who is new to yoga.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And is it like focusing in on this as a way of life kind of question?
right. That would be a good one for sure.
Awesome. That sounds like an excellent place to start. And just for context, when you think about yoga practice, are you thinking about in the context of like in-person studios, or more like online videos, or where are these beginners encountering yoga?
Okay, so there is just maybe a little bit of a context and setting
Hmm.
because it could be the physical practice, which is what it's called asanas. And then there is the breath work, the philosophy, the diet. There's because it's life, right? Touches on everything. So
I think I probably spelled that wrong, but
right. So anyway, so yeah, it could be the studio practice, but it could be also kind of a teacher-student um, connection,
Hmm. Okay, okay.
and that is, I guess, realized to different mediums. Um, I might be too abstract. Please help me.
No, this is great. I'm just
Right.
getting everything down here. So I've got kind of like just a couple notes. And the reason I'm just doing this extra list off to the side is because I just wanted to have like a basic kind of like vocabulary. Kind of, this is starting to help us get oriented. And now I think we can kind of get started with the map. We have some basic ideas of what we're interested in here. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you can just maybe even eliminate asanas. So physical practices that, so it's the same thing.
I
Yeah.
got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yay. Okay, so coming over here, we've kind of already started working ahead, and for those that are viewing the stream and like maybe wondering how to make, thank you, Rahul. I was conflating vipassana with asana, so I don't know what I'm talking about. So thank you.
No
Um,
problem. We'll keep it simple, simple words. So physical practice, breath work. There is a philosophy aspect as well.
okay, yeah, and I'm just gonna start using this list section over here. Um, so we're here to serve beginners, and the beginners need, for now, we'll say yoga as a way of life,
Mhm.
and maybe we'll refine that as we go on and as we learn more about it. But in order to do that, there are some capabilities here. There's the studio practice, there's the philosophy, there's the physical aspect to the practice. And you mentioned like breath work is interesting. Is How does breath work fit into this existing picture of user, need, and capabilities? Is breath work part of the physical practice?
It is. It can be done as a separate exercise. It's always integrated with the physical practice. There's a multitude of benefits as you are becoming more experienced with this breath work. There's also a variety. There's a range of breath work.
Mm.
So it's a whole universe, actually.
So this is a whole very vibrant thing that we could dig into, and We could
Right.
probably make a map just about breath work if we wanted to.
I imagine so, but I guess for the sake of sharing this with someone who is just the beginner, I think it falls into the capabilities.
Okay, excellent. So one of the things I think you've been exposed to before, and David and I teach a lot, is this idea of restraint. Whenever we're making maps, one of the ways that people get stuck early on is they get kind of too into the details too quickly, and then the rest of the process gets really hard. It feels very labor intensive. So I think we have enough to get started, and then we can maybe cycle through the map process a couple times and see where we end up. So off to the kind of right here, so I'm going to take these items in our list, I'm going to turn them into a value chain, and then you can tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong. But I think what relates to what else here, so we're trying to do like a dependency tree. Beginners depend on yoga as a way of life, and then yoga as a way of life depends on a studio practice. And a studio practice, well, maybe I actually have this backwards, but let's do it the wrong way first, and then you can correct me here. So studio practice depends on physical practice, and then studio practice also depends on philosophy practice. I think I might have these reversed. What do you think?
Yeah, I would probably pull physical practice upward, and then it's one way to do it is in the studio. Um,
Okay, yeah, so the studio is one of maybe the underlying dependencies of the physical and philosophical practice.
right.
Okay, let's give that a try. And then I'll just correct my relationships here. Okay. So
Yeah.
one of the tricks that we talk about is when we're making a map, we kind of can put words at each of the relationships. You can use the phrase needs or depends on to sort of stand in and create like a sentence of sort. So beginners needs yoga as a way of life, which the chat is very emphatically emphasizing that that might be not quite the right way to frame it. So maybe we'll dig into that in a second. And then what we're saying here is yoga as a way of life needs philosophy of practice, and so on and so forth, all the way down. So if this reads as a coherent sentence, then we've succeeded in making a value chain for the most part, right? Like, we might have to change some grammar a little bit, but for the most part, this seems right, at least according to the model that we've set out as our draft 0. So now, this is, our first draft of the model. We haven't introduced evolution at all.
Mhm.
And so now we're actually, by doing this in public, we're exposing ourselves to challenge. Like this is transparency in a certain way, right? Where we
Yeah.
say things and then people react to them, and then we're like, oh right, okay, it's more like this. So
Yeah,
one of
there's not going to be a book published out of this.
well, so reacting to the chat, I'm thinking about this a little bit, right? So, and Sue is putting this pretty well, I think. As a beginner, she says the first dependency seemed to be knowing when an actual drop-in low-risk class was happening, and because like physically she might have been stiff, had a sore back or something like that, and thought yoga might be a way to like relieve that. So it's almost like, how do beginners encounter yoga for the first time? And then from our perspective, Vesna, I'm imagining like we're really hoping that yoga is going to be a way of life at some point.
So maybe we can alter the statement of a need and say beginners need an introduction to yoga. Because yoga is a way of life, is very lofty and it's just like out there, right? So what we just say, it's an introduction to yoga, to physical practice and philosophy practice, and maybe also understanding where they are. Like
Yeah.
everyone's at the different stages. So what would that be? That would be a capability. I think there should be a conversation somewhere around like yeah, I would just say understanding where the students are, yeah, where the student is. It's like a Kanban, going
Ah, I
back to
love it. Yeah. Okay.
meet your client where they are.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's on my mind too with this is that, there's almost kind of like stages in the life cycle, if you will, of a yoga client, or really like anyone who's deeply engaging with a practice could eventually be, over a course of years engaging so deeply that their needs change. And so
Yeah.
I could imagine like a beginner transitions into a different kind of like intermediate user. I don't know how you would scale that out, but that's not something we have to worry about right now. But I'm imagining that at some point there's like an advanced yoga practitioner who wants yoga as a way of life,
Right.
as a daily practice. And so there's like a transition over time.
Yeah. Right.
It's not guaranteed, but it could happen as well.
Right. And even by saying understanding where the student is, you may have a really wide range. Capabilities can vary. I mean, even physically or just the aptitude towards like philosophy or breath
Yeah.
work, physical practice, diet.
There's an interesting comment in chat too. Yeah, just distinguishing those different practices, I think, from En Huang. So usually beginners will not know about philosophy practice until they are in better shape physically, not in pain. So that's what they said. I think that's an interesting point because Sue is describing this as well. Like yoga was a relief. It was
Yeah,
a treatment for pain
right.
from the
And
beginner perspective.
this is where I'm offering that everyone makes the choice, because if they're coming and looking for a way to relieve a pain, they may achieve that through compassion or through other aspects of what
Mm,
yoga is. Physical practice is mostly known here in the West,
okay.
but it's really around, I mean, some of the origins, I think, are more around how do you reduce the suffering.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to just like who we're centering and in the map and the conversation, because at least from like a Californian perspective, or like a Western and Californian perspective, yoga is often seen as like exercise or
Oh,
fitness.
yeah.
However, traditionally, or in other cultures or where yoga comes from, that's not necessarily the case, like what Vesna was mentioning. And so there is kind of a cultural split in how it's viewed.
Right. So we can get to this kind of same result from many different angles. One angle might be that you experience it as a fitness and it comes more from outside in, but it can be achieved also from like inside, I would say out, if that even makes sense.
Hmm.
So it could be the motivation lies in the, like, I just want to look better. And then also as I'm trying to achieve that, I will feel better. But it could be also just I just want to feel better, and then I can achieve that through the conversations, through understanding, the meditation. I think meditation is one of the capabilities here as well.
Okay. I'm just capturing some of the thoughts that I'm hearing because I think we're going to make some more decisions about how to frame this problem for the next step, which is turning this into a map. I'm noticing that suddenly introduction to yoga seems like a little less important compared to this concept of reducing suffering and doing so through physical or philosophical practice. Um,
Mhm.
and it's
There's
interesting.
so many ways to look at this. I don't see the chat right now, but I think that might be really the best aspect of this exercise, because one thing I'm feeling as a yoga student is like there is a sense of community.
Mm,
So whether that's a capability or something that is more as an outcome, um, yeah,
okay.
we can
So,
just put it there and see what happens.
well, yeah, absolutely. This is so good, and I'm really starting to notice too. So one of the aha moments just that happened for me was when we talk about capabilities in an organization and capabilities in a Wardley map. Obviously, we've heard Simon and others say before that you could map one component could be blown out into its own map, and you could condense an entire map down into one component. Oftentimes that's the way it works. But what I didn't realize is that, like, imagine this, and I'm just going to propose this and see how this lands. Imagine that reducing suffering, in order to reduce suffering, you have to feel better. And in order to feel better, you have to have physical practice and philosophical practice occurring. And then we, from the standpoint of looking at this system, would say, okay, this whole capability of physical practice plus studio practice plus philosophy practice, this is the introduction. There's a slice of each of these things that is the introduction to yoga, and it produces the met needs of feeling better, which then meet the internal needs of reducing suffering. And it's like that whole value chain, that composition of parts together is what is that capability. We're just zoomed in on it right now. I don't know. That was something that like sort of popped into my head. Does this seem like a fair way to frame it?
It speaks to me. I wonder though about again the audience and the choice of the words. I find it's also very Western-like, not to acknowledge the humility, because as I even said, the word suffering and reducing seems like almost counter, I would say, marketing. What happens, we always want to add, we always want to make, like even by, let's say, organization wanted to make money or win or something. And here we are now coming from a very different place, very vulnerable and kind of from humility that we are not feeling great. So I wonder if there is another need to word it differently or not. This speaks to me, but I would be curious, like if it can be said in a different way.
Okay, this makes sense.
Feel better probably is just like a very, kind of, like let's feel better.
I love this. Okay. So I'm going to suggest we do something really quick where we select a subset of these components to continue with us onto the Wardley map. And one of the ways we could do that is just by, do you have a pen tool in your Miro board? It's on the toolbar on the left-hand side.
Pen tool.
Should look a little bit like an upside down pen.
Yeah.
And if you click on that and then just do a little squiggle on each of the components on this value chain section of the map that you want to carry forward into the map, just put a little squiggle on it and then we'll copy those over.
Yeah. Okay, like meditation.
And for everyone in the audience, the reason I'm doing this step is because we could spend a long time trying to make the perfect map, the perfect model of yoga, like true according to the way the entire globe sees it or particular subcultures see it. What I'm trying to do instead here is redirect us to what Vesna is interested in. And so the point is not to like make the perfect map, it's to create a model that Vesna can engage with thoughtfully in order to uncover an insight about the way things work that is useful to her in particular. And regardless of who would be making a map or what group of people would be making a map, it's there to serve the interests of having good conversations among that group of people. And so we're focusing on that interest and building the energy and building the exploration rather than the perfection. I hope that made sense.
And most of this are good to me, Ben. I just find maybe fitness is kind of already in the physical practice.
Okay.
I kind of selected most of them.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I'm going to copy all of the ones with the check mark on it over to the Wardley map section. And let's see. So one of the things we can do is to provide sticky notes with a little bit more meaning that's readily apparent to us. we can change the colors. So if you come over to the right to the Wardley map, if you single click on a sticky note, you'll notice that there's an option to change the color. And I'm gonna just pick, let's say pink for the user. But could you take a moment and, for each of the sticky notes that you think are needs as opposed to capabilities, could you pick a color for needs?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I'll go with the...
And again, for the audience, a couple, I think last week, we had a live stream with Jennifer Carlston, and they helped us kind of pay attention to this idea of layers of needs, and how sometimes, I think David, you said it this way, right? Like, wait, what was it that you said about if your need is the application? What's that?
Oh yeah, it was something about if the user need is your product, you're probably not quite right.
Yeah.
And it goes a little bit deeper.
Yeah, right on. And Jennifer kind of took that like to the next level and was like, okay, yes, and even if you go deeper and you say the product produces some kind of like value, and that value is the user need, well, you can go even deeper than that. And she pulled out, or they pulled out a like what NVC, nonviolent communication worksheet for like intrinsic needs that people have, like acceptance or like physical needs like food, etc. And like if you can connect a high level need back to an intrinsic need, like you're really starting to understand user needs. And that's one of the principal like doctrinal things in Wardley mapping is focus on user needs. You have to understand them. Okay, excellent. So I see you've changed some of the sticky note colors, and we have a light green for user needs. And yeah, let's maybe adjust the map a little bit so that we can get things all set up here. So I'm not really placing these on purpose from left to right. I'm just putting together the value chain. Where does meditation fit into the value chain before we start looking at the left-right position?
I would say probably like together with physical practice, philosophy practice, breath work, and like meditation, they're all capability.
Okay. And all that comes together to produce feeling better? And
yeah.
Again, like that's not the only things these do. We want to be very careful not to reduce things down too far. But for the map that we're exploring today, for beginners are like, ow, life hurts right now, or my body hurts, or I need to stretch, or I have some sort of pain that I need to get relieved. I just want to feel better. And so framing the problem in terms of their needs as they would put it can help us figure this out. And thank you, David. So David's dragged in a worksheet. I
just brought in the nonviolent communication, a partial list of needs.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay. So then, does this value chain from top to bottom make sense so far to you? Does that work?
Yeah, I would probably, so even if 4 elements like breathwork, physical practice, philosophy practice, and meditation may seem like a lot, but they're the components that then you keep growing in them, and becoming advanced for me at least, doesn't mean you're adding more elements, but you're becoming better at each one of them. So I would mention that to a beginner anyway, and then this is where I think it's up to everyone, dependent where they are and what their aptitudes are. They can decide how to kind of grow this.
That makes sense. I've been doing something kind of funny lately, and I don't know, it feels weird to me, but I'm going to share it with you and everyone who's watching right now, because I think it's kind of an interesting metaphor. And also, for those of you who have heard me rant about conditions, consequences thinking before, this might connect to that a little bit. But there's this little like image that I've been using lately. I almost like imagine like each of these components is a box, and inside the box is a garden.
Right.
And if we can imagine that the component, the box, is basically producing the value that it's supposed to produce. So like the extent to which physical practice is producing feeling better, for example, the extent to which that relationship is working is the extent to which this garden inside this box is thriving. And I found that just to be like a kind of helpful metaphor, because then I can zoom in on each of these capabilities and I can go, okay, is my physical practice thriving right now? Well, I know for a fact that I haven't been exercising lately, and I haven't been stretching, and I haven't been doing all these things. So I'm just going to like, this is mostly dirt.
Right. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think I have a richness in the philosophical practice, although I'm not like super good at it. I do have like a little bit of a functioning there. And so one of the things we talk about is conditions and consequences. It's kind of like process philosophy for components. Like the components themselves are conditions that are producing consequences right now. And for beginners, most of the time, each of these components are dead.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing there. So we're trying to lay the foundation for those conditions, like for the garden to start thriving. Anyway, that's my little rant about
Right.
about these
Well,
ideas.
yeah, I mean, now I'm just thinking out loud. It could be also that some people are doing certain things, but they're not necessarily understanding how is that benefiting them. So if they approach yoga only as a physical practice for the sake of looking good, they're kind of missing the point, right?
Yeah.
Because that puts them in a place where they're still not achieving what they really want to, like feeling
Right on.
good, like, yeah. So yeah, it's something to be said about integrating all these different aspects.
I
And
think
which is
that's really important actually, because it's not just these individual components. Like
right.
the sum of these components is different than the whole. Like the whole is the integration of these parts and the interactions between them. Like there's some Russ Akoff things we could talk about, like these interacting parts produce something that is other than these individual parts taken, like summed up mathematically, I guess. But like the whole actually has its own like quality of thrival or absence of that quality. Like,
Yeah. And just speaking of like philosophy, I'm not thinking here like, something super deep or huge. It could be as simple as like yoga is non-competitive.
mm, mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
something that is easily like explainable to a child. So if you teach yoga to a child, you can say, you're not competing. Like it's more
Yeah.
like your practice, I do mine. And even by meditation, it can also be explained to a 6-year-old, like, just kind of close your eyes and imagine something. And so I think that's where, even if you don't speak of it, it's still present in the practice.
Yeah, and I'm imagining too, like the non-competitiveness of it is part of what feeds into this community part. It's we're not here to be better than each other. We're here to help and support each other, and I think that's very important. So
yeah, I did think for a second there's obviously people who prefer to do things individually, but that's like again just one manifestation. Community then still exists because there's like still some kind of support, even if you're mostly inclined to do it by yourself.
yeah.
You may want to read, you may want to reach out and see kind of where that compare, not in the sense again of the competitiveness, but what might you be wanting to learn even by yourself, right? So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like foreshadows a little bit to some of the gameplay options from the Wardley strategy standpoint. Like one of the options is cooperation. One of the options is finding other people who are doing this thing and working together on it. And I think like capitalism, unfortunately, does have this survival of the fittest kind of metaphor going on, and evolution is like in Wardley mapping, evolution is fundamentally about survival of the fittest and things like that. But the trick we get to play as people examining these problems is that we get to thwart capitalism by creating little areas where it doesn't permeate it totally. We can use capitalism, the fact that it is happening around us, whether or not we like it, we can use that, but then we can create areas where it doesn't apply, and where cooperation is more, the metaphor, or helping each other is more the way that we focus on it. Like common good, we together, more than the individualism that seems to be rampant in the common like frame. So just to take the next step in the process, let's see if we can. I worry a little bit because it feels like the way we're approaching this is very thoughtful, and we're about to smash this very thoughtful system into a capitalist frame. So I'm just gonna be like, hey everybody, we know we're doing this. Apologies. We're trying to learn something from it. We're not trying to destroy what it is, but let's give this a try and see what it surfaces for us, and whether or not what we learn is worth it. So reducing suffering. I in this Wordly mapping template, I've kind of added this little section for user needs. There's like, is meeting this need a gamble? Is it more of a decent bet? Is it a demand that people have in this capitalist market kind of frame? Or is it just the cost of doing business? Or we could even say, is it the cost of existence? And from your perspective, where do you think reducing suffering fits in?
I would have put it on user demand, like just super without thinking too much, but happy to be challenged. Like if
Yeah.
um,
I'm perfectly happy to do that, although I will admit that I have spent a large portion of my life being very happy with suffering. So I wonder what portion of the population is like me. And
right,
so that would be something we could look into and learn about. But for now, let's put it right here.
sure,
Okay.
yeah,
So then understanding where the student is. So this is specifically within the context of yoga. When it comes to understanding where the student is, where does that fit in along this evolutionary spectrum? I wonder, like, if I scroll down and I look at, for example, the evolution labels,
mm-hmm.
I like the one for practice for this maybe. Like, is understanding where the student is a novel practice, an emerging practice? Are there good practices? Or is there one best practice?
Oh, yeah, wonder. Like I'm just even questioning, because this is such a like awareness work. Like it can be so different. Like
Mm-hmm.
how you can approach that. You can have people who are like almost like even skipping, I would say, that step somewhat. Um,
Yeah, part of what we're going to
there
learn.
anything in the audience, someone nudging in a certain direction? Um, I almost want to say emerging, just because I'm like not comfortable with good or best.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit like more advanced than all.
I think that's a fair place to start, and I'm sure folks will call it out if they think it's different. I mean, there's some good commentary in the chat anyway. Right now, like Rahul mentions that these words that I used here, decent bet, feels very product solution focused too.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
definitely is. I went through Simon's evolutionary characteristics cheat sheet, and I was like, how can I make evolution a little bit more applicable to user needs? And of course, I ended up in a fundamentally product solutions focused frame. I think it would be interesting to substitute in different words and to try out different kind of words for different kinds of problem spaces. So understanding where the student is, I think I agree with that. I think it's in stage 2 as well, because it's kind of the domain of experts. I don't think that there's a standard checklist that you can use to evaluate a student. I'm not sure that would even be appropriate remotely.
Yeah, I never seen it, and yeah, I mean, and as I say, people usually, because it's so experiential, like it's more around like actually while you practice, you are adjusting this, so
Yeah.
it's kind of custom. Yeah, custom is the word here. That's what comes to mind.
No two students have the same degree of understanding.
Right.
No two
It-
practices for
yeah, in
evaluating
some
that.
ways, even as a practitioner, you are constantly going through this step because one day you may just feel different, right? So you're and understanding where your practice is. One day you may feel stiff, another day you may feel flexible, or you may be open to try, so it's more
That makes a lot of sense.
right, like it's
Like it's an ongoing thing. Like you're constantly pushing things forward, but they're constantly regressing as well. And so
right,
like you build your own ideas of how to test where you are. And if you have a teacher, they're evaluating you in that same way. They're kind of custom evaluating each student differently depending on their situation.
right.
Okay, so feeling better. I think this presupposes that people are suffering and that they need to reduce their suffering. And so one of the ways that we reduce suffering is helping them feel better. Where do you think that fits along this evolutionary axis?
Well, this might be a checklist, which is more like a menu.
That's a good point. Yeah. I have a list of things that I do whenever I need to feel better.
Right. So, I kind of show up, go through a practice, like certain things that you might want to do without questioning it or like redesigning every time.
Okay.
So I think that should be a product.
Okay, so stage 3, that seems fair. Okay, so it's right around where it needs to be. And then community.
So I would put it similarly, like understanding in emerging, because it's a wide variety and I would say optional. I think it's still like better, like a more evolved than Genesis, because there are communities. It's more around tapping into them, understanding the interaction.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, for sure. Okay, now let's zoom in on the capabilities that we identified here in the bottom. Physical practice, philosophy practice, and meditation. Where do you think those fit?
So, let's start with the physical practice. There is a variety of it, and there is like I would say more availabilities on this thing. So they're like a product, I would say, because even if you Google search, you can find lots of these things on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so that's in product. And that reminds me too of, so some of you may know Taschen Fogelman. Taschen is a good friend. I think perhaps the only monk to give a talk at a Wardley mapping conference. But like,
Hi, Tashin.
and
If you watch this later.
if your ears are burning. But one of the things he talks about is in all the different ways of meditating, which blew my mind. I didn't know. I thought that there was just like one or two common practices, but he's like talking about like no food, like eating food and meditating on the food and the taste and all this kind of stuff, or walking meditation. And I was just like, whoa, there are all these ways of just like meditating. I had no idea. So I think that's probably in product as well. What do you think?
I agree.
And again, like these labels are a little unfortunate, right? Like product isn't like, it's probably more the practice form of this. Like there are a lot of good ways
Right.
to describe. So stage 3, there are a lot of good practices of meditation. There is no one best practice, but there are many good practices.
Right.
Okay. And then finally we have philosophy practices. Where do you think that fits?
Like that became available to me more in a conscious way when I started to study and read more. But I do believe there is an element to it, even if you just like literally just start engaging with yoga. So as I say, it has its own range, like from how do you even approach the physical practice?
Yeah.
So for me, it's not around like maybe how big is this product. It can be very, very small increment of that philosophy, but it's still a product, right?
Yep.
Because it comes together with this. Because I really believe they're all like one. Actually, one of the meaning of yoga is one. It's to unify.
Okay, so that one also fits in product as well?
That's how I see it.
Okay, I'm going to make these sticky notes just a little bit smaller so we can kind of fit them all on here. So, okay, so these all are in product. And one thing I'll mention too is that we're treating these kind of like a categorization problem where like which bucket does it fit into? But this is more of a spectrum. I mean, there are boundaries at each of these edges. So between Genesis and custom build, between custom built and product, and between product and commodity. So there are boundaries, but this is a spectrum, not so much a bucket. But I like to start with categorization just because it's easier to have those discussions, and then we can refine it more later. The other thing that I'll just mention real quick is that these labels down here for everyone who's watching this, these are interchangeable. Like you could just say stage 1, 2, 3, or 4. But you could also, like David's dragged up practice here as well. You could also use any of these words, or you could even use your own. You could mix and match. In fact, Simon does this all the time. He mixes and matches the different labels from the different kind of types of component. Recently, I did one here where I did like novel, then emerging, and then convergent. So that's totally a valid move to make. So don't feel like there's like one right way with doing these labels. Okay, excellent. And so then finally we have breath work, which is like kind of a more specific instance of the physical practice. Just for the sake of completing this, I imagine there are lots of different ways of breath work, and I imagine this is also a product. What do you think?
Sorry, breath work or
yeah,
breath. Yeah, I mean, for me again, they're all together. So
okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna stop saying practice and stop saying product and start using the practice labels. So David, I'm gonna steal your screenshot up here and just move it up.
Awesome.
And maybe I'll get back into the habit of saying practices instead of. Okay, great. And then finally, studio practice.
So let's just for a moment think about the expense, or I guess the commodity. So if I were to just check, is this now more like on the it's being offered and it's continuous and someone else can use it as well. So if I have, let's say, established a studio practice of yoga, I'm just trying to see if studio practice falls more on the right.
That's a great question, and I'm not sure. So maybe we could go look at some of the characteristics down here, even far below. So I split the evolutionary characteristics cheat sheet, which you can get if you're watching here at lwm.events/evolution. This is Simon Wardley's cheat sheet, and what I've done is kind of like split it out so that the labels are here, and then just some of the qualities are down below. Let's go through these qualities and just make a determination based on that. So studio practice. In terms of failure, does failure happen all the time? Or is it surprising or somewhere in between?
Just trying to see where you, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the evolution labels. Are you reading it now from the inquiry or?
A little bit further down, there's one
Oh,
called
okay.
evolution
Oh,
qualities.
okay, cool. Sorry, I'm just like
I
didn't.
didn't tell you that I moved down here.
Yeah. I
I
didn't
was
know.
like, surprise.
Yeah, let me see. So failure. Uh, Surprised by failure. I think this one, like just the way I again experienced this, and I think it's offered. Uh, it's set up in a like modeled way and not designed to fail. If there are failures, they should be more of a surprise.
Okay. So I'm gonna just mark this like that.
Mm-hmm.
So failure surprising. And
Right.
then from a certainty perspective,
Yeah, I think there is an understanding which is common.
okay, so
Like
commonly
everyone,
understood.
I think that like if you say, oh, there's a yoga studio, I think everyone would like have a picture of
Got it.
what that might look like.
Okay. And
I
then
similarly in different parts of the world, or like, yeah, so yoga studio is like if you go to New York or like Paris, you would still have that like oh, it's a yoga studio kind of,
yeah. Okay.
right?
So it's widespread?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I live outside Pittsburgh,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things I think about is like all these little suburbs, and even in these little like weirder like outskirt towns, there's a yoga studio. So yeah, that I
It's you ubiquitous.
yeah, and I wonder if like there are parts of the world like where that's not the case, or if the studio looks different and all sorts of things like that. But for our case, in the context that we're living in, we're gonna set that as the assumption. So I think
Yeah.
I think for the purposes of what we're doing today, that's a good enough inquiry. We could invite critique. We could invite people to take a look and say, hey, no, actually, in my experience, it's this. It looks different.
Mhm.
But that's something you would do if you were digging into this more with other people.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got we've got our Wardley map, and so yay, we did a draft of a Wardley map, and I think this is awesome because this is certainly the only map that I know of in existence about yoga, which is awesome. So
It's the
although
beginning, I hope.
maybe Sue has one, I don't know. So that'd be cool. If you have a map of yoga, tweet it at us. Just in the description of this stream, there's each of our Twitter handles. Just like tag us and tweet us your maps of yoga. And also, like, if you want to make a map for yourself, just something that I'll point out there is you can go to lwm.events/easy, and that will take you to a YouTube video, which is like 10 minutes long. You can follow along. Make your map of how you think yoga works and send it to us. I think that would be awesome to get some tweets of people making yoga maps and compare and contrast a little bit. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I would be curious about other words or something we missed. Or, yeah, anything would be great.
That'd be so cool.
Mhm.
Okay, so now for like I think the final step here, just to wrap us up. Down below in the reference section, I have this table labeled opportunity, and you can think of this as a kind of like a summary or like a useful reference that combines Simon's climate patterns, his doctrinal principles, and strategic gameplays, a subset of each of those into just this kind of quick set of prompts. And I think I'm going to jump ahead to one of these down here, build alliances. So building alliances is like really, really important for collaborative and cooperative work. I know Sue, who is watching Sue Borchard, talks a lot about like non-transactionality. But obviously, if you're running a yoga business, there's a certain interface there where you're doing transactions with the clients and so on. But community, for example, is less transactional. It tends to be more reciprocal. So I'm going to start here with build alliances. So for each of the capabilities in our map of yoga, the question that I want to ask is, do we have friends in the global context who also need this capability or also work on it? And can we reach out to them and work on it together? So going back up to the map, let's just ask that question a little bit and see what we find. I'm going to start from the bottom up for fun. Studio practices. They're everywhere, I guess. But do they work together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there is a more of a sense, I would say, there of competitiveness, because there is like a look and feel and a branding, and there's maybe different aspects of this, because like that's how you're introduced. Like it's almost backwards, right? Like it's the space, and therefore people tend to come to the space without knowing the other things potentially.
Oh yeah, it's almost like we pull
Right.
a market trick where it's like you
Right.
think you're getting feeling better as a service, but what you're actually getting is like
Right.
education in a philosophy.
Right. So I mean, I know there's like magazines and there's websites and there's like, just buzz about certain cities by knowing there's this great yoga studio. I know that about New York, for example. And so how connected, what is the interaction? I'm not quite sure. But
Some folks are saying in the chat too that like the studio itself can often, like Sue is saying that like the studio that she's experienced was, I think she taught at, was billed as a community class. And so maybe
right,
there's an interaction there, like an assumption that, hey, this is something that we do together locally.
right, right.
So that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's maybe a connection here that we haven't quite fully explored.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot in the opportunities for me. I mean, it's great to pick this one, but there's even, I would see the method and the biases, and just
Where are you seeing bias, for example?
reduced bias is the first one in the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. I think there is also overcome inertia. It's a great opportunity.
Which of these components do you think experiences in our map is experiencing a problem of bias?
Probably philosophy. I mean, that one seemed like somehow.
And for everyone who's watching, when Wardley uses the term reduce bias, what he's saying is basically there's a difference of opinion about where something is placed along the evolutionary axis, and by implication how it should be treated. And things that are in the earlier stages of evolution, like in novel, are really kind of uncertain, and so they have to be approached in a way that enables rapid change, rapid learning, in order to finally make the thing work. Whereas over here in best, it's more about enforcement and compliance. So from the standpoint of don't reinvent the wheel there, just accept the way that it's done. And of course, if you believe that it's something over here where you just have to keep trying stuff until it works, but the rest of the world believes it's over here, then that's an instance of bias in a Wordly kind of frame. And so I'm curious, where do you think the rest of the world is for philosophy?
Oh, wow. There is a quite range, quite a range. I mean, something that become more natural. Just I think the way it's introduced as a practice, like, yeah.
I see Rahul in the chat saying, like, yoga is biased as a physical practice, like
Right.
that's it, that's all there is. And so maybe the rest of the world is treating it like it doesn't exist, like the philosophy part doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Wow.
I mean, like probably all these aspects are subject to interpretations in the different parts of the world. And
Mm.
um,
Oh, and I love this too. Andy in the chat says, yoga with our neighbors is not at a studio. We bring in an instructor and they do it outside or at somebody's house and pay her. So there is some transactions, but that's not really the point. Um,
mhm.
that's interesting. Like the studio practice doesn't it's not necessarily tied to a location. I think that's
That's great. Yeah. Then could have been maybe then studio and then another capability is well, it's more like sharing the same space, whether it's outside or inside.
yeah.
Shared location, shared space.
Oh wow, yeah. And so what we've just learned is that there are multiple ways to do shared space. It's not just like a brick and mortar building.
Right. Yeah, and there's obviously these days lots of Zoom yoga classes, right? So you're just doing yoga at the same time that you're. Um,
Yeah, but a friend of mine, Shrita Sigan, would teach yoga classes over Zoom, and I think it was like a nice way of like attracting community, like bringing people in and saying, "Hey, let's do this together," because we're all
right.
stuck at home.
Right. I mean, kind of goes back to the point you want to help, you want to make others feel better. So there's different kind of ways to accomplish that.
Excellent, awesome. So
Yeah.
I know I'm running you over time here. I know you've been running from one meeting to another today, so I wanted to say thank you for coming.
I,
Um, it's been an absolute delight having you and here and talking about Wardley mapping and yoga with you. For everyone who's in the chat, thank you for being here. And if you want to take a look at Vesna's profile on Twitter, you can find her in. There's a link in the description. I think it's V_source. And David and I are also on Twitter. Come find us. Vesna, like, is there anything that you want to ask people to take a look at or to know about? Anything that you're doing?
no, just connect on Twitter and we'll keep chatting. I'm happy to meet everyone, and I imagine we somehow connected already if we know all know Ben. So
Yeah, I'm really
we
excited to
are trainers.
just connecting all these lovely people together. So that's what it's
Yeah,
all about. It's exciting.
it's absolutely feeling alive and connected. That's awesome.
Excellent. And for those of you who are new to the community, just a couple basics that you might want to know about. One is we're doing these streams all the time right now. So if you want to stay informed, you can go to lwm.events. Just type that into your browser window, and there will be a list of upcoming streams, as well as workshops that David and I are going to be doing. We have another instance of You Will Make Maps, which is an intensive 3.5 hour Wardley mapping kind of intensive, I guess I'd say. But we're friendly, we're supportive, so it's not it's not a scary kind of ordeal. We're really about creating lowering the barrier to entry to Wardley mapping. So take a look at that as well, lwm.events. And if you have any questions, like reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter. And if you want to talk to me at any time, you can just go to learnworthymapping.com and open up the little chat icon in the bottom right hand corner. I've got this little setup over here next to me on the desk, and it goes whenever someone says hello. Someone from Canberra was like typing at me at 10 o'clock the other night, and I was like, oh, hello. So you can reach me on there as well. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Vesna. Thank you,
Yeah.
David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Ben.
And
Thanks.
remember, everyone,
Okay.
knowledge is power. Making maps is creating knowledge. Go make maps. Bye, everyone.
Okay, talk soon. Bye.